how we found you was the veterans, the bio that you had for the women veterans, and like how you talked about leading a group of, was it women into southern Afghanistan. Can you just talk about that? Like I'm really intrigued, and like it seemed so inspiring. Like how did that go down? Like what happened with that?
Sure. So the program actually started in the Marine Corps, and it's called the Lioness Program. So what the military figured out is, we go to these countries and the combat arms, so the majority of the male soldiers, even though that's changed since I've gotten out, women are allowed to do combat armed jobs. They were figuring out that the males were only allowed to speak to the males. Oh. So if you think of in a traditional home setting in the United States, right, you have mom and dad and kids, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, women and men talk to each other. So they figured out that we're only talking to the men. So we're missing out on the information that women could potentially have, right? So they started this Lioness Program, which was the program to attach women to the combat arms to go out on missions and on patrols and be able to interact with the women. Because there's some countries where if you're not related, then you are not allowed to address a woman. Wow. Right, as a man,
it's very different.
Very different, culturally different.
Yes.
So the unit that I was in, they came up with the idea of having a whole company of women do this, and then we would be attached to the different units when we went to Afghanistan. So there was 64 women in my company, so they went through 12 weeks of Pashto training, which is the language spoken in southern Afghanistan where we were going. They did a lot of combat arms tactics. They did a lot of PT, right? Because the expectation is that they would have to keep up with the males if they went out on patrols or on missions. And so then when we got to Afghanistan, the women were divvied out to the different units, and so that was their mission. So I was the first sergeant for that. Hands down, the most humbling experience I've ever had in my life. I went to Iraq, but Afghanistan was completely different. If you think back of the United States potentially, when it first started with people cooking over cauldrons and mud huts, that's how Afghanistan was. Wow. But very welcoming culture, very appreciative that we were there. So it was amazing to come in, and that these women in the villages had never seen women in uniforms, and we had to show them that we were women, right? But the connection, the thing that I found was the connection with these women is being a mom, right? So at the end of, we had a translator, but at the end of the day, they were doing what they needed to do to provide for their children, and it was so difficult for them to understand what I was doing in Afghanistan, and my kids weren't with me, right?
Wow. Yeah, because they're like, how could you leave your kids?
Right. So that was a lot of times, when we went out, a common talking point, right? Because we would start talking about kids, and just like in any conversation, you find something that you have in common, and then, the conversation blossoms from that.
Yeah, so were you interacting with kids as well?
We were. Wow. So one of the, one of the camps where the soldiers were, they did a weekly class with the women and children, and so it was called the Women's Center. So they had women and children that came from the village, and then they would teach them different classes, right? Basic hygiene, basic first aid, even how to properly feed your children, right? And so we would provide like a light snack for them, and then we'd always give them like hygiene items, right? So things that we take for granted in the United States, they have no idea.
We're just simply accustomed to, like that's
exactly
just
what you do. When you were a child, your mom taught you how to brush your teeth, right? These women and children there had no idea what a toothbrush was, right?
Wow.
And I remember one specific instance that I went out to see the soldiers, and I went out with them. The boys were playing soccer, and so I played soccer in high school, right? So I asked them, I was like, they were playing soccer, but not like in an organized method, just kind of like kicking the ball. And so here I am with the scarf on my head, and trying to show these boys how to play soccer. And then the Afghan army, they shared the compound. They're just looking at me like, what is this soldier doing, right? And then that same day, there's a mom who was nursing her baby, and I thought her baby may have been maybe 3 or 4 months, and come to find out that the baby was actually 6 months, but she was so malnourished.
Wow.
And I thought she was actually nursing her, but all she was doing was soothing her. She had no milk. And so she went to give me the baby, right, as if I was going to nurse her, and I was like, my son's 4, that's long gone, right? And then she asked, she had another little boy, and she said, through the translator, when you leave, can you please, take my kids with you,
Wow.
For a better life. And I mean, it just really makes you appreciate what we have here in the United States when you hear a mom who's willing just to hand over her children to a perfect stranger to provide a better life.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you couldn't, did you?
Of course.
Yeah,
you
you
take
take
a
the child, but
yeah.
like I feel like having that moment is probably extremely hard. I can't even imagine having to be like, I'm sorry, I can't do that for you.
Right.
As much as like I would want to.
Of course.
To take that child to a better place.
Right.
That's heartbreaking,
Right.
honestly.
It is.